Ed, I really appreciate you and the fine cooking from Sister Angelina. Um, so tonight we're going to talk about two topics, temperance and air. So essentially we've been going through the New Start paradigm on the 8 laws of health. 8 laws of health basically are, the acronym New Start stands for nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance. Tonight is air, and tomorrow is rest and trust in God. So we'll talk about those, the remainder of the 8 laws of health. And these are biblical principles. It's also found in the Spirit of Prophecy. But it's also something that's common sense. I think nutrition is common sense, right? Water is common sense. That's how very simple God is. God is very simple. He doesn't complicate things. Health is very simple. That being said, we're going to talk about temperance and how simple it is tonight. Before we begin, let's just have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your presence here tonight. It is said in your word, Lord, that wherever you are, the Spirit of the Lord is willing to heal. And I pray, Father, that your Spirit will be with us today. Help us to heal, Father, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually as well. Prepare us for battle, Lord. Prepare us to do thy work and thy will and good pleasure. And as we learn these things, Lord, may you open our minds, open our hearts to receive your wisdom, not the wisdom from man. Thank you, Lord, for all things and for answering according to your will and good pleasure. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so temperance is not a hot topic, but it's a very important aspect, very important law of health. And I hope that you will see just how important it is after this presentation. As always, I like to have an open scripture, and the scripture is taken from 1 Corinthians 9, verse 25, and it says, "And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible." My first question for the night is, what is temperance? What is temperance? Not extreme, yeah. You have a question?
Total abstinence from that which is harmful, and what's the word? Balanced use of good things.
Yes, it's a very good one, and I can't even repeat that, but it's a very good one. I think about temperance as, there's a quote from Socrates. Socrates once said, "There is no difference between knowledge and temperance, for he who knows what is good and embraces it, who knows what is bad and avoids it, is learned and temperate." That sounds like a mouthful, but let me give you a story. So I used to like watching TV. I used to love cartoons. For instance, one of my favorite cartoons was G.I. Joe. Who remembers G.I. Joe? Yeah, G.I. Joe was a cartoon. I used to love watching those things, army guys fighting and things like that. And at the end of G.I. Joe, there was a moral story, a moral lesson. And the G.I. Joe would say to some children, "Well, Billy, you shouldn't steal. And this is why you shouldn't steal." And the Billy would say, "Oh, thanks, G.I. Joe. Now I know." And the G.I. Joe would then say to him, "But knowing is half the battle." Knowing is half the battle. And that's essentially what temperance is. Temperance is knowing what is good and doing it. Temperance is knowing what is bad and avoiding it. Simply what it is. And you have a choice to make, doing the good things or doing the bad things. You have a choice. I think Socrates had something, it's a great understanding of what temperance is, but he's missing one thing, and we'll talk about that one thing that he's missing. But essentially we can also talk about, we make temperance very complex. It's all about choice, each choice that you make, but you can make it very complex. And the complex equation for temperance, I think, is temperance equals total abstinence and moderation and self-control. So these three things, we'll talk about these things tonight, these three things, how this can lead to our being temperate. Total abstinence. Can we find it in the Bible? 1 Corinthians 6 verse 12 says, "And all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any." What is Paul saying here? Essentially, things like these, we can be taken under their power. Of course, these are things that we can be addicted to. But there are other things too that we should completely avoid or to be abstinent from. Things like alcohol, smoking, and a nicotine habit, caffeine as well, illicit drugs, street drugs, of course, like cocaine and these things, processed and ultra-processed foods. We talked about that on the first night. We talked about nutrition, and also animal products. We also talked about that multiple times we talked about cholesterol, but also the first night as well. Let's talk about alcohol. And many individuals struggle with alcohol. Did you know some 22% of people who have taken a drink will develop dependence on alcohol at some point during their lifetime? Just one sip and they'll develop a dependence. The WHO, World Health Organization, has estimated that 2 billion people used alcohol in 2002, and more than 3 million people died in 2012 due to damage to their body caused by drinking. Astounding numbers. And I don't think it's getting better. It's 2024, about to be 2025. I don't think these numbers are getting better. Alcohol has been ranked as the most damaging drug by some experts. Most damaging drug, but we still have liquor stores open. How about smoking? Smoking and nicotine habit has been a problem as well. A very vicious addiction. In 2015, 68% of adult smokers, 22.7 million people in the U.S., said that they wanted to quit smoking. In 2018, 55.1% of adult smokers, 21.5 million, said that they had made a quit attempt in the past year. In the same year, 7.5% of adult smokers, 2.9 million, successfully quit smoking in that year. Just a small percentage. So it's very addictive substances. Just one puff sometimes is enough to keep one going back. How about coffee or things with caffeine? This is also an addictive thing, especially in medicine. I was fortunate enough to have problems with caffeine. Anytime I drink caffeine, my heart races, so I couldn't have it. But at medical school and residency, people were downing things like Monsters and Red Bulls and all these other things, but also coffee as well. And coffee's been shown to be bad for many diseases. We'll talk about one in particular today. Question. Well, one thing about temperance is that when we talk about these things, we should try to have good replacement for them, right? Of course, there's no good replacement for smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol. But how about coffee? What are some good replacement for coffee? Tea. Tea. Well, we can have tea, herbal tea. Roma, Ticino. Yeah, some good water. Water is good too. The forgotten beverage. Most of the coffee is water, so that's a good thing. But other things. Another question I have: what other things have caffeine in them? Chocolate. What else? Some teas. Green tea. So caffeine essentially is a stimulant, and any stimulant, basically, it can increase the brain's function over beyond what it needs to be.
Doesn't the caffeine dehydrate you?
It causes dehydration as well. We'll talk about that as well. There's actually a study done where this individual, it was on TV, it was like, I think it was on one of the news stations, where they did a study where someone had an MRI, and the MRI of the brain basically showed blood flow to the brain, free blood flow to the brain, no problems. 30 minutes later, the person drank coffee. And then 30 minutes after coffee, 1 cup of coffee, the person had another MRI, brain MRI. And the blood flow to the brain decreased by 40%. So imagine, 1 cup of coffee, but who has 1 cup of coffee? Yeah, so if I'm having decreased blood flow to my brain, imagine to my heart, or to my liver, or to my kidneys, or you get the drift. But
Even decaf has caffeine.
yeah, decaf doesn't mean no calf. But basically, there's some other things that have caffeine in it. So, for instance, we talk about the coffee, and we know some popular coffee stores out there. 469 milligrams in just one cold brew, Starbucks Nitro. We have Starbucks Fresh filter coffee, 308 milligrams. Red Bull, 80 milligrams. Dark chocolate, 80 milligrams. We have certain medications like headache medications for migraines. One from the UK is Anadil, but there are other ones that we use here as well. Green tea, 21 milligrams. Black tea, 31 milligrams. So there are other things that has caffeine as well. And it's been shown that caffeine can cause insomnia, headaches, among other things. Like you mentioned as well, it can cause fluid loss from the body. It causes dehydration in the body, essentially. But what are some good replacement for cocoa or coffee or chocolate? Well, I haven't been able to find one. But they say carob is the next best thing. I don't agree with that. But this says from Scientific America, perhaps the primary benefit of carob as a chocolate substitute is that unlike cocoa, carob contains no caffeine or theobromine. Both are of these chemicals which belong to the family of substances called methylxanthines are stimulants. While caffeine works primarily on the central nervous system, theobromine stimulates the cardiovascular and pulmonary systems. So we can have issues there. I've known people who've been on caffeine that can have increased heart rate, for instance, and atrial fibrillation, atrial flutter, these things. Just like myself. I hope no one's salivating, but basically you aim to avoid these things. Yes, that's Halloween party. Avoid ultra-processed foods. Like I said before, 60% of the U.S., 90% of individuals use 60% of their foods as ultra-processed foods. Things that come in a box, a bag, so forth and so on. So aim to avoid these things. Things like high fructose corn syrup, the things that come in the box are laden with high fructose corn syrup. And it's been shown in studies when fed with male rats, high fructose corn syrup, to young rats suffering from anemia. When fed to male rats, high fructose corn syrup led young rats suffering from anemia, high cholesterol, heart hypertrophy, that means enlarged heart. These rats didn't reach adulthood, and their female counterparts were infertile. I think it's the same issue with high fructose corn syrup in humans as well. But also these things is artificial sweeteners. If you think about Sweet and Low and all these aspartame, Splenda, these things have been shown to cause health issues, health concerns as well. One thing it can do is change the gut microbiome. If you change the gut microbiome, it can also affect your immune system. If you affect your immune system, that can lead to things like autoimmune disorders or sleep issues, a lot of other things like even cancers as well. But what is addiction? We can be addicted to these things. Susanna Wesley, the mother of John Wesley. She says, "Whatever weakens your reason, impairs the tenderness of your conscience, obscures your sense of God, takes off your relish for spiritual things, whatever increases the authority of the body over the mind, that thing is sin to you, however innocent it may seem in itself." So these things may seem very innocent, but at the end of the day, sometimes people are very addicted to even chocolate, or addicted to even coffee. They can't come off of it. But obviously, the other things like alcohol or cigarettes. Yeah, we'll get there as well. Another thing, again, to be moderate. What is temperance? We just talked about total abstinence, moderation in sugar and salt and oils and TV, media, social media, all these things. Is this biblical? Philippians 4 verse 5 says, "Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand." Especially at this day, we should know that we should be moderate in even the good things. Some people are very glued to the TV, glued to YouTube, and glued to whatever the thing of the day is. There's nothing that the TV can tell you that the Bible cannot. But also people are immoderate when it comes to using salt. What's the average salt amount of salt we should have each day? It's on the screen, but none? No, you would actually die. You'd actually die if you didn't have salt. Right. But added salt, they said less than a half a teaspoon. Yeah. But who adds just less than a half a teaspoon to their meat? Yeah, exactly. I know that people say that, but a lot of people suffer especially from high blood pressure because of the amount of salt that we take in. The American Heart Association said less than 1,500 milligrams per day. World Health Organization says less than 2,000 milligrams per day. U.S. Food and Drug Administration says less than 2,300. I don't know which one to follow, but we should aim to have less salt in our diets. You had a question?
One each person, so the bigger the family, the more.
I don't think it goes that way, but if it works for you. More than 40% of the sodium consumed by Americans comes from these top 10 foods: breads and rolls, cold cuts and cured meats, pizza, soups, sandwiches, these things. So I'll give you a broader list. Sandwiches, rice, pasta, other grain-based dishes, starches, non-starch vegetables, meats, poultries, and seafood dishes. Many of the meats that they have in the market, basically they inject them with saline so it stays more fresh and plump. And then you add more salt to that saline and more seasoning to the chicken, and then it becomes extra salt. And you say, "Oh, Doc, I didn't add any extra salt to my chicken or add any extra salt to my beef. How am I having high blood pressure?" Right. Pizza as well, soups, of course, store-bought. You can make your own soups. Chips, crackers, savory snacks, desserts and sweet snacks, condiments and gravies, cold cuts and cured meats, and bread and tortillas, especially bread and tortillas. It says that yeast breads, including rolls, bagels, flour tortillas, and wraps, rank first as the food items that contributes to the most sodium in American diets, according to the American Heart Association. Did you know that? Of course, you make your own. For some perspective, just one slice of Whole Foods organic 100% whole wheat bread sandwich contains the sodium equivalent of 22 potato chips. One slice of bread. When shopping, look for loaves or tortillas or whatever bagels with 5% daily value or less of sodium. a daily value of 20% or more is considered high, especially for those who have high blood pressure. You want to be careful with the daily value of sodium. Another thing is sugar. According to 2016 medical review, sugar intake increases. As it increases, LDL cholesterol goes up. So remember I was telling you that it's not just the fat that we're eating, it's also the sugar that we're eating is increasing our cholesterols. Whereas HDL cholesterol levels go down. So the good cholesterol goes down, bad cholesterol goes up because of the amount of sugars that we're having. This is especially true of some sugars, such as refined fructose or sucrose, as opposed to other sugars such as glucose. So the high fructose corn syrup basically increases, or the aspartame increases your LDL and decreases your HDL. Well, how much sugar should we have? Question, how much sugar should we have a day? Not much. Good answer. Well, it says that men should have at least, at most, 9 teaspoons a day. Women should have 6 teaspoons a day, and children should have less than 3 or less teaspoons a day. Even that is too much when it comes to certain things, because we're adding sugar upon sugar sometimes. Well, how much sugar do you think the average American has per day? 2 cups?
Is that saying that wives should make dessert for their husbands every day?
I'm not entering that conversation. But it says that the average American has about, say, 65 to 70 teaspoons, teaspoons of sugar each day. Yeah.
Because of the different foods, like desserts and things like that?
No, it's more sugars. So you added sugars. It's a lot. I mean, think about a can of Coke, for instance. Yeah. So it's a lot of sugar that we're having. That being said, let's talk about diabetes. What is diabetes? What do you think diabetes is? What kind of a disease is it? Fat, sugar. Well, yeah, a lot of people say it's a sugar disease. Diabetes is a sugar disease, right? But at the end of the day, sugar is the fruit of the problem. It's not the root of the problem. So we're fighting high blood sugar, but what caused the high blood sugar? So let's go into understanding more about diabetes. What is diabetes? So diabetes is a group of diseases which involves the organ called the pancreas, and everyone in here has a pancreas, otherwise you wouldn't be alive. And insulin, the hormone that it makes. So pancreas and insulin, think about those two things. And there's different types of diabetes, over 10 different types of diabetes. You may know type 1 and type 2 and gestational diabetes. Also, there's LADA, late onset diabetes. So basically, it's an issue with the pancreas and the insulin that it makes. So the pancreas is right behind your stomach, and whenever you have a pancreas problem, you can actually feel the burning sensation in your stomach for that reason. But you also feel the burning sensation in your back because it's more closer to your back as well. So someone with pancreatitis, you'll feel both the burning sensation in the front and also in the back. And the pancreas has cells that make different hormones. For instance, the beta cells, they make insulin. And the alpha cells, they make something called glucagon. And you don't need to know that for now, but insulin basically is what is needed to get the glucose from the bloodstream into the cell. So think about insulin as a key. And the key goes to the cell, unlocks the door. The door opens and the glucose goes inside of the cell. And then the cell closes and uses that as energy. Now, if I don't have the keys, like in type 1 diabetes, if I don't have a lot of keys, then I cannot unlock the door. If I can't unlock the door, that means the blood glucose stays inside of the bloodstream, hence high blood glucose. The other thing is, now, say I'm making a lot of insulin. I have a pancreas that's working, it's making a lot of insulin. but the cell itself doesn't respond to the insulin. It's almost like the locks of the door has been changed. That's called insulin sensitivity. So I'm making a lot of keys and trying to unlock those doors, but someone's been changing the locks. Oh man, Jair, you have a problem tonight. No locked doors tonight, please. But basically, the doors cannot open, and that's what's called insulin insensitivity. So it's either a problem with the pancreas not making enough insulin, or the insulin itself is not able to unlock the doors because there's something blocking those doors. And that's called type 2 diabetes. Now what's blocking these doors? It could be a lot of things. Studies have shown that high-fat diets or high cholesterol diets can actually, remember we talked about the plasma membrane of a cell, and in the plasma membrane of a cell are cholesterol molecules. Now what if I make a lot of cholesterol, or I'm producing or eating a lot of cholesterol? Then it gets stuffed in those cells. It's almost like that cholesterol is jamming the door. So the key is trying to unlock the door, but something's blocking the door itself. So the high-fat diets, high cholesterol diets can block that door. But also if I eat too much sugar, what am I producing? More cholesterol. So it's like a vicious cycle. So I'll talk more about type 2 diabetes, but these are just different concepts about diabetes. One, you're lacking, you have insufficient insulin, or you have insulin, but you don't have, the door is not responsive to that key. And you have diabetes when you have excessive thirst, excessive eating, excessive urination. It's called polyuria, polydipsia, and polyphagia. So the problem is when you eat, you're not getting the energy in, and the energy is actually also pulling water from the cells. And when you have excess water, the kidney says, I've got to get rid of this excess water. So you pee a lot, but also you have no energy. So you say, oh, I'm so tired. I just ate. I have so much. I don't have any energy. So I eat a lot, polyphagia, but also I'm also thirsty because that glucose is pulling out the water. So I'm drinking a lot. I'm peeing a lot because I'm drinking a lot. I'm also eating a lot because I have no energy because that glucose is not being used as energy. It's a vicious cycle.
That's how you gain weight?
Right. You gain weight because of inflammation, basically. And your body is, your cells, your fat cells also respond to, the question was, that's why you gain weight. Your fat cells also respond to insulin. Your fat cells, when they get insulin, they store the fat. So you can store your fats, but you cannot store your glucose. Or you cannot use your glucose. That being said, you can also have signs and symptoms of diabetes, for instance, blurry vision, low extremity, impotence, numbness, tingling, yeast infections, so forth and so on. These are some signs and symptoms that you may have, especially for men. Impotence is one of the first signs. Yeast infections for women, first signs. But what is normal glucose? What do you think is normal blood glucose? Well, close. Normal blood glucose is between 70 to 90. Anything below 70 is considered, or 65 to 70 is considered low blood glucose, and that could be a problem. Hypoglycemia could be a problem. Anything above 95 to 100 is considered high blood glucose. But you have diabetes when your fasting blood glucose is over 125 milligrams per deciliters. If you go to the doctor and he tests you finger prick 2 times, if your blood glucose is over 125 milligrams per deciliters, you're considered to have diabetes. Your oral glucose test was, for women, for gestational diabetes, they'll give you this nasty tasting liquid, and they'll measure your blood glucose afterwards. It's all sugar, basically. And if your blood glucose is over 200 milligrams per deciliters just once, you're considered to have diabetes. Anything from 100 to 125 is considered pre-diabetes. Anything over 125 is considered diabetes. But nowadays, who knows the test that they use to determine diabetes? Who's ever heard of A1C, hemoglobin A1C? Yeah, hemoglobin A1C. Do you know what that is? So, and you have a red blood cell that flows through your body every day. And sugar is sticky. And so sugar can stick to your cells every day. If I were to have, if I'm drinking some grapefruit juice and I let that grapefruit juice spill in my hand and let it dry, what happens to my hand? It becomes sticky. And same thing with glucose. It's sticky to cells in my body. So my red blood cell is traveling through the bloodstream and it's collecting glucose, the stickiness to the glucose. Now, normally glucose goes inside of the cell, but it can stick to certain cells. Now, the red blood cell has a lifespan of 90 days. So every 90 days, you get new blood cells. Now, we can measure the amount of blood glucose you have on a daily basis by measuring how much stickiness how much glucose is sticking to your red blood cells, especially the hemoglobin of the red blood cell. So think about the red blood cell as a donut, and in the middle you have hemoglobin, and whatever glucose sticks to it, we measure that percentage. And if the percentage is over 64%, then you have diabetes. 6.4%. You definitely have diabetes, 64%. But consider this, normal A1C targets is less than or equal to 5.6. So 4.8 to 5.6, that's the normal stickiness of glucose in your blood stream or your body. Pre-diabetes is 5.7 to 6.4, and diabetics have a A1C over 6.5. So what causes these things? Obviously, we mentioned things like the ultra-processed foods which has these extra high fructose corn syrup and all these other things. And for diabetics, they'll say, watch out for carbs. Don't eat carbs. And that's not, the full story. There are simple carbs and there are complex carbs. So complex carbs are from the fruits and the vegetables that we get. So we get sugars from the fruits and also the vegetables, like a carrot or a beet. But the carrot and the beet also has fiber. So the complex carbs, they have the fiber, but also they have the sugar, and the fiber helps to balance out the sugar. Whereas the simple carbs, they have no fiber at all. So you're basically just eating raw sugar when you're having these things. So be careful with the simple carbs, ultra-processed foods, and aim to have more of the complex carbs. How about animal products? Does that cause or can that lead to diabetes? Studies have shown just 2 servings of red meat a week, processed or unprocessed, can increase your risk of type 2 diabetes by 62%. Just 2 servings a week. I mean, some people have 2 servings in just one sitting. But it's not just red meat, it's also whatever meat is out there as well. We talked about the T. Colin Campbell, the author of the China study. He said the people who eat the most animal proteins have the most heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. It's been shown over and over again that these things, no matter what type of meat you have, it can lead to diabetes. Well, how about these things? Sugary beverages, but also the caffeine and coffee and all these things. Studies have shown that caffeine may lower your insulin sensitivity. So remember I said that something changes the lock? Caffeine itself may lower your insulin sensitivity. That means your cells don't react to the hormone by as much as they once did. They don't absorb as much sugar from your blood after you eat or drink. This causes your body to make more insulin, so you have higher levels after a meal. And then, if you continue to do this, then your pancreas gives up and says, you know what, I'm tired of this, I'm going on vacation. And when it goes on vacation, that means then you have to depend on insulin. Especially if you have type 2 diabetes, your body already doesn't use insulin well. After meals, your blood sugar rises higher than normal. Caffeine may make it tougher to bring it down to a healthy point. This may lead to too high blood sugar levels. Over time, this may raise your chance of diabetes, complications like nerve damage, or even heart disease. One study looked at people with type 2 diabetes who took a 250 milligram caffeine pill at breakfast and another at lunchtime. That's about the same amount of drinking 2 cups of coffee with each meal. The result, their blood sugar was 8% higher than on days when they didn't have caffeine. Their reading also jumped more after each meal. So it's like an additive effect. Yes, it adds 8% more of blood glucose, but also with the meals, it's like an additive effect. It makes the meal more sugary, for instance. Why? Because it's blocking the sensitivity of the cells. Dean Ornish once said, think about it, heart disease and diabetes, this is a medical doctor, which account for more deaths in the U.S. Yes, diabetes can cause death. More deaths in the U.S. and worldwide than everything else combined are completely preventable by making comprehensive lifestyle changes without drugs or surgery. So it's not just making lifestyle changes in what you eat, but also different things like walking. We talked about how exercise is very important, and walking is the best form of exercise. Everyone can do it. Well, most people can do it. Did you know that when you exercise, it doesn't matter if you have insulin, the key, or if you have the keys but you're not using it, your cell door opens. So just exercising, your cell door opens. So one of the best ways to beat diabetes is by exercise. If you have diabetes, being active makes your body more sensitive to insulin, the hormone that allows your cells in your body to use blood sugar for energy, which helps manage your diabetes. Physical activity also helps control blood sugar levels and lowers your risk of heart disease and nerve damage. So just exercising, like I said, opens that door. Even if you don't make any keys, which is not the case, even in type 1 diabetes, you're still making some, you're not making enough. But if you exercise, those doors open. What's another insulinogenic factor that we talked about? We talked about it yesterday. Sunlight. Sunlight opens those doors as well. Without the keys, you can go outside and sunbathe, and the cells open up to receive it. So God is so good that He doesn't just leave you to your pancreas to make the insulin. You know, the walking can help. The water can help. Also, the sunlight can help as well. By the way, how does water help? Did you know that when you're dehydrated, your body actually produces cortisol? When you produce cortisol, then your body actually produces more glucose. It takes the glucose from the liver. So you can have diabetes because of cortisol and being dehydrated, but also being stressed as well. So this is the study that showed the blood glucose after walking, and basically the red line is someone without activity, the green line is someone with activity, showing that after walking at the lunchtime, the blood glucose decreased. 5 to 10 minutes just walking to and fro could be very helpful. The World Health Organization says, this is a global report on diabetes, I believe this was in 2015, 2017, around that time. Interventions that promote healthy diet, physical activity, and weight loss can prevent type 2 diabetes in people at high risk. So even if you have genes that may lead you to have diabetes, or familial genes, just healthy diet, physical activity, and weight loss is helpful. Other things that are very helpful, self-control. We talked about total abstinence. We talked about moderation, and now self-control. This is the three-headed monster when you consider temperance. Self-control, think about portion control, intermittent fasting, and total water fasting. We'll talk about that. Portion control. Who's ever heard of Hari Hachibu. No, it's a Japanese saying that means essentially only eat 80% of your meals until you're full, at least. So when your stomach is 80% full, you stop eating. And obviously, the Japanese are one of the longest living people on Earth, so it's actually helpful for them. Huh?
The
Blue zone, Okinawans, right? So think about this plate and subtract 20% from that plate. Who's ever heard of intermittent fasting? Right. How is intermittent fasting done? Off and on. Turn the switch on and turn the switch off. Well, yeah, on and off and on. So intermittent fasting, I'll explain it like this. So basically, I like to promote the 18-6 fasting diet. So this is what it is. So 2 meals per day. So for instance, if you have breakfast and then you have dinner, that's the only meals you have per day. And in between, 6 hours apart. 6 hours apart between your meals. So the 6 is the 6 hours between your meals. And the 18 after dinner, that's when you have your next meal, which will be 8 o'clock in the morning. So if you have your first meal at 8 o'clock in the morning, at 2 p.m., that's when you have your next meal and your last meal of the day. 6 hours apart. You can do that as well. This is the 18-6 fast. But also no snacking in between. So between the 6 and between the 18, no snacking. You're either drinking water, herbal teas, and no cheating by eating, by doing smoothies either. That's also eating. Or drinking juices. That's also cheating. There's no such thing as a good snack. Yeah, I know you're going to say something. What is it?
If we don't drink smoothies or juice, when are we going to drink it?
I'll answer you right afterwards. Yeah, so it's best not to drink. If you're going to have juice, drink it right before your meals, about 15 minutes before your meals. Smoothies as well. That's basically a food. It takes time for it to digest. Now, what about the timing of eating? Did you know that there's a particular good, the beneficial time for us to eat and when not to eat? Solomon once says there's a time and place for everything, right? Under the sun. And your body has a certain clock. It's called a circadian clock that dictates when I'm supposed to eat and when I'm not supposed to eat. When I'm supposed to exercise and when I'm not supposed to exercise. How about eating? Well, at nighttime, a second circadian clock in your brain produces higher levels of melatonin at night, which act on the pancreas to further suppress insulin release at night. So if I'm eating after a certain point at night, my insulin factory is not working. So what's happening to my blood glucose? It's going to go up. No matter what you do, it's going to go up because my insulin factory is not going to be working. So you wake up in the morning, you have high blood glucose, and you're like, oh, how did I have high blood glucose? How? Because you ate too late.
You know, I find when I eat late at night, in the morning, I'm hungry.
Yes.
I ate, but if I eat earlier.
Now, what did I say about diabetes? What did I say about the signs? Polyphagia, polydipsia, polyuria. You want to eat more because you're like, oh, I just ate something and there's no energy. So I want to eat more. So that's one aspect why you feel hungry in the morning. But when does it become dark? Oh, sorry, I just gave the answer. When do you start making melatonin? And it starts becoming dark. In some places, it starts becoming dark at 3 o'clock in the evening, 3:30 in the evening. So the best time to eat is before that time because your body is actually producing more melatonin and you're not making sufficient insulin to handle your blood glucose. Now I tell individuals in those places, if you want to have a light meal, that's fine. But people have heavy meals for supper. And that's not adequate, especially for the body's production of insulin. Therefore, if we keep eating late into the night when our pancreas is asleep, The low insulin drip is insufficient to instruct the liver and the muscles to bring additional glucose into their cells. Do you have a better understanding of diabetes? No? Do you have a better understanding of diabetes? Oh, great. Well, that was helpful. But what's the greatest battle ever fought? Self is the greatest battle ever fought. Romans 7 verse 19 says, "For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do." It's a frustrating thing trying to fight yourself, right? You're trying to do good things. You're trying to stop smoking, but you cannot. You're trying to stop your sugar addiction, but you cannot. The good that I would, I do not. But the evil what I would not, that I do. Very frustrating. So what's the answer for that? What's the remedy? Zechariah 4 verse 6 says, "Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts." We can have the willpower, we can have the money, the medical information, but at the end of the day, it doesn't lead to us overcoming. Only by the Spirit of God can we overcome. We have to ask Him for His Spirit. Each day, ask Him for His Spirit to overcome. No matter what the addiction is, no matter what the problem is, ask Him for His Spirit to overcome. And temperance is actually a fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5 verse 22 to 25 says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance." So how can we be temperate? Only through the Spirit of God. Against such there is no law, and they that are Christ have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. So you can know that if you're not walking in the Spirit, that you don't have a spirit of temperance. We're going to ask Him though. God wants us to ask. If we know that we're lacking, we can ask Him each day. But also understand, I've come to understand a greater understanding of this text. Luke 5 verse 39, it says, "No man having drunk old wine straightway desireth new, for he saith, the old is better." Sometimes it's very difficult to get rid of these things. But continue to ask for His Spirit. It's not just one day, or the next day, or 1 month, or the next month. Keep asking for His Spirit, and He will help you. Some of these addictions is difficult to break. That being said, I'll close with the scripture. Ephesians 2 verse 8 and 9 says, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man could boast." If we could, by our willpower or by our works, overcome, then everyone would do it. But only by God's grace can we overcome and be temperate in all things. I pray that this was helpful. You can ask questions later. Take a 5-minute break, and we'll start with ear and the importance of ear in our lives.